Good evening. Nice to meet you all. Let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Rajeshwari, pathologist from Chennai. Okay. Today's lesson plan includes two chapters, one from systemic path and one from general path. From systemic path we will discuss kidney, and from general path we will discuss immunity. Three features of today's discussion would be: first, almost 90% of the questions are not the exact previous old questions. It's been formed newly. Second thing, each question will have 5 choices unlike the usual 4 choices, and third will be each question or most of the questions may have more than one answer, right? And I will be asking you questions in between. Please help me to make it an interactive session. Yeah, we will start with kidney now. Okay. First, Finnish nephrotic syndrome is associated with Finnish nephrotic syndrome is associated with mutation podosin, mutation nephrin, alteration of slit diaphragm, steroid sensitivity and steroid resistance. You want me to carry it like this, right? You want me to have it near the mouth. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Okay. So your answers? Okay, or alternately we will do one thing. We will just go to the discussion, then come back to the choices. That way we can cut down the time consumption also. Yeah. So to understand the mechanism of nephrotic syndrome, you need to know the ultrastructure of the glomerular capillary wall, which is actually a filtration membrane, that slit diaphragm. So it has 3 important parts. One, it's actually a capillary vessel wall. So like every vessel wall, it is lined by fenestrated endothelial cells. Here you can see this. And then it is supported by resting on a continuous basement membrane, peripherally surrounded by a layer of visceral epithelial cells. What connects the visceral epithelial cells will be the string which is made up of lot of proteins. This is the ultrastructure of the glomerular filtration membrane. You can see the glomerular capillary wall is lined by endothelial cells resting on a continuous basement membrane, and these visceral epithelial cells connected by such strings. The strings is made up of such proteins. The most important proteins of this slit diaphragm would be nephrin and podosin. Of course, you have other proteins like CD2AP, alpha actinin and F actin. So nephrotic syndrome, by definition, it includes proteinuria of more than 3.5 grams per day, the resultant hypoalbuminemia and edema, and a hyperlipidemia. So the resultant lipiduria and lipid cast. So why there is lipidemia is, say there is loss of protein in the urine and the body is trying to compensate. So liver compensates but in a wrong way. It produces increased amount of lipoproteins. In addition to this, which other proteins level will be high in nephrotic syndrome? Other than lipoproteins, another protein level will also be elevated in nephrotic syndrome. Good. So this compensatory increase in synthesis will contribute to hyperlipidemia and the resultant lipiduria and the presence of lipid casts. So nephrotic syndrome, we know the most common cause of nephrotic syndrome in children, it is minimal change disease. In adults, that's what we used to think. The most common primary glomerulopathy is membranous. You can see the percentage. So the most common cause of nephrotic syndrome in adults now is secondary causes like diabetes, amyloidosis and other causes. So if the choice includes such secondary causes, go for it. The choice doesn't include, then the answer will be your membranous glomerulonephritis. So hereditary nephrotic syndrome genetics would be NPHS1 is a gene which codes for the protein nephrin, which is the most important part of the slit diaphragm. So when that goes mutated, the result will be congenital steroid sensitive nephrotic syndrome, which is called as Finnish type. And NPHS2 is a locus for second protein called podosin. When that gets mutated, the result will be steroid resistant nephrotic syndrome. So now Finnish nephrotic syndrome is associated with mutation in nephrin. Nephrin is a part of slit diaphragm. So, slit diaphragm gets altered and this will result in steroid sensitive nephrotic syndrome. So, all these three are your answers. In nephrotic syndrome, apart from the usual triad, the triad will be your nephrotic range proteinuria, edema and hyperlipidemia, lipid cast. So, apart from this, the patients are prone to develop thrombotic state. So, why it is due to? So, these up to this you know, and there is hypercoagulability, and this hypercoagulability is mainly due to loss of antithrombin 3 in the urine. And why there is proteinuria nephrotic syndrome? It's because of this loss of basement membrane polyanion. Heparan sulfate will coat the basement membrane, which will give the charge for the basement membrane, and the cells, usually substances are filtered based on two properties, one size, the other charge. So, this charge based filtration of the glomerular base membrane is due to the presence of heparan sulfate molecules that gets lost in nephrotic syndrome with the resultant loss of protein in the urine. And one such protein getting lost along with albumin transferrin will be your antithrombin 3. Apart from this, there are certain other mechanisms causing hypercoagulable state in a nephrotic syndrome patient. So, apart from this loss of antithrombin 3, it is due to increased synthesis of fibrinogen. Yeah. Is it okay? Okay. Yeah. So, apart from loss of antithrombin 3, it is also due to increased synthesis of fibrinogen, increased platelet aggregability and altered activity of protein CNS. All these mechanisms act together and will cause hypercoagulability, hence making the patient vulnerable to develop thrombosis with the resultant Buchiari syndrome. So, in a nephrotic syndrome patient, the thrombotic state will be due to loss of antithrombin 3, increases of fibrinogen, increased platelet activity, and it is not due to loss of protein CNS, it is due to altered activity of protein CNS. Yes. So, Wilms tumor is associated with the most, we will go to the discussion, we will come back. So, the most common primary renal tumor in children would be Wilms tumor, usually affecting children between 2 to 6 years of age, and is associated with 3 known congenital disorders. One is Vaga, where Wilms is associated with aniridia, genital abnormalities and mental retardation. The genetic locus would be WT1 11p13, chromosome 11p13 the genetic locus, and in this case in Vaga syndrome, that is 33% of the patient to develop Wilms tumor. And second syndrome will be Denish-Dras syndrome, where the patient will be usually having male pseudo-hermaphroditism. Like any other hermaphrodite, these patients will be, in addition to developing Wilms tumor, and will develop at the risk of developing gonadoblastomas. The third syndrome will be Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, where the patient will be having hemihypertrophy, organomegaly, omphalocele and adrenal cytomegaly, and here the patient, in addition to Wilms tumor, they may develop hepatoblastoma, adrenal cortical tumors, soft tissue tumors and others. The usual presentation will be fever, abdominal pain, hematuria or even hypertension in a child. So, pattern, microscopic picture of Wilms will usually be called as triphasic, meaning there will be presence of epithelial, stromal and blastemal components. So, this is what. So, in a Wilms tumor, when there is additional p53 mutation, that will confer resistance to treatment Wilms tumor. Okay. So, Wilms tumor is associated with, is it associated with hypertension? Yes. Aniridia? Yes, in Vaga syndrome. Hermaphroditism? Yes, in Beckwith-Wiedemann. Hemihypertrophy? Yes. Polycystic kidney disease? No, it has got nothing to do with polycystic kidney disease. Doubts vandirukka? Vanda paakanum illaya? I couldn't see. Okay. fibronectin nephropathy is actually one of the recent entities. It's there only for the past 1 decade. We will see the features. This is a fibronectin. What it is actually, what it is function? It helps in intercellular matrix, cell matrix interaction, helps in healing and repair. So, fibronectin nephropathy is inherited in autosomal dominant mode, where the proteinuria is the most common symptom. Hypertension may occur, it does not mean it does not happen, or it is very common. So, hypertension may be a symptom of fibronectin nephropathy, where the serum fibronectin levels are high. See, we have fibronectin in 2 loci, one in serum, the other will be the tissue fibronectin. Even renal mesangial cells will produce fibronectin, but what accumulates in fibronectin nephropathy is a serum fibronectin. In spite of having normal serum fibronectin levels, there will be accumulation of fibronectin in the glomeruli, in the mesangium. So, these deposits will be amyloid negative, immunoglobulin negative, complement negative, but IHC for fibronectin will be positive. So, you can make out this PS positive fibronectin nephropathy, where the glomerule is converted into a lobulated mass. Now, the most common presentation, hypertension? No. Elevated serum fibronectin levels? No. Amyloid deposition in the mesangium? No. Immunoglobulin complement? No. Immunoglobulin complement amyloid will be negative, and none of the above? No. So, the answer is none of the above. If I can have another laptop, that will be better, where I can see the presentation. Yeah. ADPKD is not associated with autosomal dominant adult polycystic kidney disease, where the kidneys will be studded with multiple cysts evenly placed in cortex and in the medulla. So, PKD1 gene chromosome locus will be chromosome 16, where the gene product is polycystin 1, and PKD2 gene locus is chromosome 4, and the product will be polycystin 2. So, what function they have normally will be, this polycystin 1 has a role in intercellular and cell matrix interaction, and this polycystin 2 acts like a calcium channel. Right. So, autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, though the pathogenesis starts earlier, the patient becomes symptomatic by the time he reaches 4th or 5th decade. And the most common symptom will be hematuria. Of course, urinary tract infection, hypertension, nephrolithiasis may be the other symptoms. And why there is hypertension in polycystic kidney disease? Due to the presence of cysts, they will compress the renal vasculature. When the kidneys going for ischemia, the result will be activation of renin-angiotensin axis. So, that will result in hypertension. So, its association very often asked. So, when you discover a patient to be having autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, you have to look for its association, like cysts in the liver, pancreas, ovary, spleen, and berry aneurysm in the circle of Willis, mitral valve prolapse, and aortic regurgitation, of course, colonic diverticula. Then the second entity, autosomal recessive kidney disease, like any other autosomal recessive disorder, this will start manifesting from the childhood. It is even more aggressive, and here the gene is PKHD1 in chromosome 6p. The protein is fibrocystin. So, kidneys are enlarged and minute cyst in the cortex and the medulla, associated with presence of liver cyst and portal fibrosis. That is why the name fibrocystin. So, ADPKD is not associated with, it is associated with mitral valve prolapse. Is it? Yes. Aortic regurgitation? Yes. Saccular splenic cyst? Yes. Saccular aneurysm? It is associated with berry aneurysm of the circle of Willis and not saccular aneurysm. Of course, it is associated with sigmoid diverticula. True about post-streptococcal nephritis. So, nephritic syndrome, the common triad includes oliguria, hematuria, and hypertension. Of course, they can be proteinuria, but in a non-nephrotic range. What is the nephrotic range? Presence of protein above 3.5 gram per day. So, nephrotic syndrome. So, usually acute proliferative glomerular nephritis follows 1 to 4 weeks after throat infection or skin infection by group A beta hemolytic streptococcus, and the patients usually will be presenting fever, oliguria, hematuria and others, and the antigens include endostreptocin and NSAP, meaning nephritic strain associated protein, and there is deposition of IgG, IgM complement preferably in the subepithelial zone. So, the causes of nephritic syndrome include infections in short, small vessel vasculitis, MPGN and IgA nephropathy. These are the 4 common causes of nephritic syndrome, and there is be elevated levels of anti-streptolysin O and anti-DNase, just fixing the cause as streptococcus, and there will be transient reduction of complement because it also involves IgM, which is a complement fixing antibody, but this reduction in complement will be only for a transient period. So, the reduction in complement will not extend beyond 6 weeks. At the maximum we can wait for 8 weeks, beyond which if the complement levels are still reduced, then you can have to revise the diagnosis. This cannot be due to PSGN. So, it is characterized by enlarged hypercellular glomeruli with the proliferation of the mesangial cells, endothelial cells and epithelial cells. If severe, this can go in for RPGN. So, this is the glomerular capillary lined by endothelial cells resting on a basement membrane surrounded by visceral epithelial cells. So, you can see. So, you can see there is hypercellularity of the endothelial cells, mesangial cells and leukocytes infiltrating. So, this is the hypercellular glomerulus in PSGN. So, in comparison, RBC cast will be seen in nephritic syndrome, whereas lipid cast will be seen in nephrotic syndrome. Proteinuria, nephrotic range in nephrotic syndrome, non-nephrotic range in nephritic syndrome, and hematuria is more common in nephritic syndrome. And now, true about post-streptococcal nephritis include endostreptosis antigen, yes. What else is the antigen? NSAP, good. Paucicellular glomeruli, no, it's actually a prototypical example of hypercellular glomeruli. The cellularity is due to proliferation of mesangial cells, endothelial cells, epithelial cells and leukocytes. And persistently reduced complement levels, no. So, only there is transient reduction of complement levels, and it follows 6 to 8 weeks after skin infection, 1 to 4 weeks after throat infection, and immunofluorescence show IgA, no, it's IgG, IgM and complement. Crescents in RPGN are composed of. So, RPGN, 2 important features of RPGN is the renal failure is rapidly progressive. Second thing, the hallmark feature will be presence of crescents. So, it is an example of proliferative glomerulopathy where there is crescents, and to define a crescent it should have at least more than 2 cell layer of proliferation, and the prognosis is going to be dependent on the number of glomeruli showing the presence of crescents. So, the first and starting even for RPGN development is glomerular basement membrane rupture. So, this is a normal glomeruli. The green line indicates the intact GBM. Okay. So, what happens in RPGN is there is disruption of the glomerular basement membrane, GBM rupture. Any pathology that is causing GBM rupture. The resultant leakage of plasma proteins. So, those clotting factors will also be leaking out, causing a clot in the extracapillary area. This part they will be forming a clot, and fibrin is the main component of the clot, and this will start stimulating or rather irritating this parietal epithelial cells. This is a visceral epithelial cells, and this is the layer of parietal epithelial cells. So, the fibrin will be formed in the Bowman space, and that will stimulate the proliferation of parietal epithelial cells. So, you can see. So, here parietal epithelial cells started proliferating, and soon monocytes, macrophages, lymphocytes will start becoming part of the crescent. Okay. Finally, later when the disease subsides, which occurs very rarely, in that case the crescent will be converted into a fibrous crescent. So, the starting event for RPGN will be GBM rupture. The most important part of crescent will be fibrin. The cells of the most important cells of the crescent will be parietal epithelial cells. So, what causes a GBM rupture is vascular damage. So, which pathology causes the vascular damage? It means RPGN is classified into 3 types according to the pathology that is causing the damage. First, type 1, in every type we have idiopathic, just forget about it. In type 1 it is due to Goodpasture syndrome. You all know Goodpasture syndrome, what type of disease it is? Autoimmune disease, where the antibodies are directed against GBM, alpha 3 chain of type 4 collagen of GBM. So, that attacks the GBM, that is when GBM ruptures. And type 2, it is immune complex mediated vasculitis. You can go back to vasculitis and think how vasculitis will be classified. 1, by the size of the vessel wall involved, large, medium, small. For the large vessel vasculitis, temporal arteritis, Takayama's arteritis. Then medium size vasculitis, Kawasaki, PAN. Small vessel vasculitis, we have a long list. So, first by size of the vessel wall, second by the pathology, whether it is necrotizing or granulomatous. Example for granulomatous vasculitis, both the large vessel vasculitis are granulomatous vasculitis. Example for necrotizing vasculitis, Wegener's and PAN. Right. And then small vessel vasculitis, again it is being classified, it will be classified according to 2 ways. One is whether small vessel vasculitis is due to immune complex or due to ANCA. So, and then if it is going to be ANCA positive, then it is PNCA or CNCA. So, that is how we will classify vasculitis. So, only when it comes to small vessel vasculitis, we are going to see whether it is immune complex or ANCA positive. The same thing, actually glomerular vessels are, they belong to which type of vessels? Large vessel, medium or small? Small. So, it is basically small vessel vasculitis. So, in type 2 it is due to immune complex, and in type 3 it is due to ANCA positive vasculitis. Which vasculitis is CNCA positive? Wegener's is the only vasculitis positive for CNCA. PNCA will be positive in some close to 10 pathologies. This is RPGN, you can see some pathologies rupture the GBM, causing leakage of cells into the extra capillary space. So, this is the picture in type 1. You know, type 1, the antibodies are uniformly attacking the entire GBM. So, you can have linear deposition of immune complex along the entire capillary wall. So, you have this pattern, but in type 2 it is basically due to immune complex. Wherever immune complex is involved, you are going to have lumpy, bumpy, granular pattern. In type 3, this you are looking at actually antibodies. Type 3 is due to ANCA positive vasculitis. So, it is going to show nothing in an immunofluorescence. So, this will be the pattern for vasculitis. So, this is a crescent, and what will a crescent do to the glomeruli? Why it makes the renal failure to progress so rapidly? It's because once when they become quite big, they will start compressing the glomerular tuft, causing renal failure. The types of crescents, in a young stage it will be cellular, later it will become fibrotic. So, even fibrous tissue, fibroblast, collagen will be part of the crescent. So, crescents in RPGN are composed of parietal epithelial cells, monocytes, of course lymphocytes. Fibrin is the trigger for the parietal epithelial cells. So, you have all these things in a crescent. Good. So, everything will be part of crescent. Mesangial deposits are not seen in. We will see. So, for you to understand again the same features. So, glomerular capillary wall, that is this glomerular filtration membrane, it has 3 main parts: fenestrated endothelium resting on a continuous basement membrane, supported by or surrounded by visceral epithelial cells, connected by string made of proteins, most importantly nephrin and podosin. Good. So, why this picture I am showing you here is, when you have deposits along this between the endothelium and the basement membrane, that location is called as subendothelial. When you have deposits on the membrane, it is going to be intramembranous or membranous deposits. When you find deposits here between the epithelial cells, basal epithelial cells and the base membrane, such deposits are called as subepithelial deposits. So, these three locations to be understood over here, right. So, when you have deposits on the membrane, membranous. When you have deposits between the endothelial lining and the membrane, it is subendothelial. And when you have deposits between the visceral epithelial cells and the membrane, it is subepithelial. And the entire glomerular, these are actually vessels, glomerular capillary. How are they supporting themselves? How are they able to stand there? Supported by mesangial matrix. So, when you have deposits in the mesangium, it is going to be called as mesangial deposits. Each pathology will have its favored location. Of course, they will not restrict to only one location, most often to such favored locations. That's it. So, this example shown over here is, this is actually membranous glomerulopathy. Where are you seeing the deposits? Subepithelial. Okay. So, in membranous glomerulopathy, there will be deposits on the membrane, but on which side? Subepithelial side of the membrane will be carrying the deposits. So, broadly these four zones. Subepithelial zone is a preferred zone for post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, where the deposits you will call as subepithelial humps, lumpy bumpy granular deposits, and then membranous glomerulonephritis, that is what you have seen in the picture. So, it will have membranous deposits on the subepithelial aspect, okay, and then RPGN. So, these three pathologies will have preference for the subepithelial zone. And second will be basement membrane, you know, Goodpasture, no doubt about it. It is basically against the membrane, so you will have linear deposits along the membrane. One another pathology that attacks the membrane is MPGN type 2. It is also called as MPGN type 2, dense deposit disease, where it has the dense deposits on the membrane. So, MPGN type 2 and Goodpasture syndrome, the preferred location would be for the immune complex deposits would be the membrane. Third will be subendothelial, MPGN type 1 and SLE. So, these two will have subendothelial deposits. Fourth will mesangium, always IgA, because of its neutral charge, will be trapped in the mesangium. So, IgA and the other end of the IgA spectrum will be Henox choline purpura. So, both these will have mesangium as a preferred site. So, IgA will always be trapped in the mesangium. So, apart from this, post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, where do you commonly see the deposits? Post-streptococcal subepithelial. SLE subendothelial. SLE and MPGN type 1 subendothelial. MPGN type 2, MPGN type 2 dense deposits on the membrane. So, it is membranous. Which other pathology affects the membrane? Goodpasture's disease. Then you can revise this with you. So, subepithelial location is preferred by post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, RPGN and membranous, the one which you saw in the picture actually in example. So, membranous glomerulonepathy. Second, basement membrane will be preferred by Goodpasture, that goes without saying. Apart from that, you have the dense deposit disease, MPGN type 2. And then third location would be your subendothelial, MPGN type 1 and SLE. These two are basically immune complex mediated disease. Such immune complexes tend to get deposited in the subendothelial zone, purely because of the charge. And mesangium always loves IgA, it just traps the IgA in it. Right. So, PSG and SLE, where do you have SLE deposits commonly? Subendothelial. Where do you have deposits in PSG and Goodpasture syndrome? Membranous. So, PSG and SLE you can have deposits apart from this preferred location. You can, most of the time when you look at a kidney biopsy for immunofluorescence, you can find deposits in other locations too, more in the subepithelial zones, but also in the other zones. And maximum cellularity seen with the prototypical example of hypercellular glomeruli, acute proliferative glomerulonephritis or post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Their proliferation is due to which cells proliferate? endothelial, mesangial and infiltrating WBCs. Yes. So, membranous glomerulopathy, that is what you have seen in the example. Here you can see deposits. These are visible epithelial cells, and you are seeing deposits along the subepithelial aspect of the membrane. So, MPGN, we have 3 subtypes actually now. Everything characterized by thickening of the membrane. What is the other name for membranoproliferative? Mesangiocapillary glomerulonephritis. So, MPGN type 1, where do you have the deposits? MPGN type 1 SLE, subendothelial. So, you can see over here. So, it is subendothelial location. This is endothelial cells, this is GBM, these are the visceral epithelial cells. MPGN type 2, where do you have? Dense deposition on the membrane. So, you can see the membranous deposits in MPGN type 2. Again the same thing. So, membranous subepithelial aspect of the GBM, type 1 MPGN subendothelial location, and type 2 MPGN along the membrane. These are the preferred locations for each pathology. In the same thing. So, where do you have deposits in PSGN? Post streptococcal glomerulonephritis, subep. You can see the subepithelial humps, that is why they are rightly called as subepithelial humps. And this membranous glomerulonephritis, where do you have the deposits? Subepithelial. MPGN type 1, MPGN type 1 and SLE subendothelial. And mesangial will be preferred by IgA nephropathy and HSP. Good. So, these are deposits and the location in different pathology. You just need to remember that most of the pathology will involve IgG along with IgM or IgA. The pathology that involves only IgM will be focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. Most of the time you may not be able to find any deposits in FSGS, either it will be none or IgM, and mostly you can say it will be C3. The one pathology where you can see early complement components will be MPGN type 1. So, in MPGN type 1 you have deposition of early complement components, and FSGS you have IgM, all the rest will be having only common features. And GPS is the only disease where you have linear deposits of immune complex. So, mesangial deposits are not seen in, where do you get mesangial deposits? IgA nephropathy, HSP. Where do you have membranous deposits in membranous glomerulonephropathy? Subepithelial. Minimal change? No deposits. Good pastures on the membrane. So, all the other three will not have mesangial deposits. Which of the following is not a form of proliferative glomerulopathy? So, this is how a normal glomerulus will look like, but this is how a proliferated glomerulus will have the appearance. So, this is a normal glomerulus. You can see the continuous GBM, and this is, we can make out the mesangial hypercellularity. The pathology is affecting mesangium, preferably affecting mesangium, IgA nephropathy and HSP. So, when you find more than 3 cells in the mesangium, it is called as mesangial hypercellularity. So, when the cell count in the tuft is increased, you are going to call it as proliferative glomerulopathies. You have a variety of conditions. I just want you to remember the non-proliferative glomerulopathies, right. So, non-proliferative, membranous, minimal change, FSGS. All these 3 will be a non-proliferative, and all the rest will be a proliferative. So, your primary glomerular diseases like minimal change, membranous and FSGS is going to be non-proliferative glomerulopathies, and apart from these you have diabetes, amyloidosis, myeloma and kidney. So, they are not going to have any proliferation cells. Of course, they will have deposition. Deposition need not induce proliferation always. So, all these conditions are associated with non-proliferation of the glomeruli. So, again when you talk about proliferation, you have to say whether it is intracapillary or extracapillary. Give me one example where you have extracapillary proliferation, not within the glomerular capillary. RPGN. Where do you have the crescents, location of crescents? In the Bowman space. It is not actually inside the capillary. So, the only example of extracapillary proliferation includes RPGN. So, all the rest will be intracapillary. And intracapillary again the same thing, mesangial deposits predominantly by IgA nephropathy, full house, that is when you stain for immunoglobulins by immunofluorescence, the full house, entire glomerulus will be positive for immunoglobulins. This effect you get often in lupus nephritis. And then post infectious starry sky or a lumpy pattern, pseudo that and all, okay. Crescentic and RPGN type 2, RPGN is due to type 2 RPGN is due to type 1 Goodpasture's, type 2 immune complex, type 3 ANCA positive vasculitis, right. Actually all these are vasculitis, just because they are vasculitis affecting the glomerular basement membrane resulting in GBM rupture and the pathology continues. What causes the vasculitis is, mechanism is, the etiology is this, type 1 Goodpasture's, type 2 immune complex, type 3 ANCA positive vasculitis. So, now which of the following is not a form of proliferative glomerulonephritis? MPGN, is it proliferative? As the name says, it is membranoproliferative, proliferative. PSGN, again malt lymphoma, HIV, you may not be sure of proliferative glomerulonephritis, but you now know which all are non-proliferative glomerulonephropathy, minimal change, membranous, FSGS, diabetes, amyloidosis, myeloma, fibronectin. Just memorize these non-proliferative glomerulonephritis. All are non-proliferative glomerulonephritis except, so you have to find out the proliferative glomerulopathy in here. Good. What is the other name for MPGN? Mesangiocapillary. The following is true about Buerger's disease. Buerger's is the other name for IgA nephropathy. So, IgA nephropathy is the most common cause of glomerulonephritis in US, not in India, right. So, it is primary and secondary. Secondary will be due to, maybe due to respiratory infection or GI infection or liver disease. Basically, there is inadequate clearance of mucosal immunity. So, there is trapping of IgA in the mesangium, and the most important point to be noted over here is there is development of glomerulonephritis. The patients will be presenting symptoms of glomerulonephritis after 1 to 2 days of sore throat, when it follows respiratory infections. This in contrast with PSGN, there the duration will be 1 to 4 weeks. This is called as synpharyngitic glomerulonephritis. So, IgA nephropathy, you can see mesangial expansion and proliferation. So, immunofluorescence show often IgA, C3 and properdin. Along with this, you can find IgG and IgM also. So, true about Buerger's disease is most common cause of nephrotic syndrome? No, actually it causes nephritic syndrome, not nephrotic syndrome. Associated liver disease? Yes. Respiratory disease? Yes. GI disease? Yes. Immunofluorescence show IgA, C3 properdin? Yes. Not a feature of Alport syndrome. So, Alport syndrome is an example of nephritic syndrome, which is characterized by the triad. When a patient presents with renal abnormalities, with eye and ear defects, you should work up for Alport syndrome. Which test you would do to diagnose Alport syndrome? It is just skin biopsy, that is enough. So, triad is basically defect in alpha 5 chain of collagen 4. It is not just alpha 5, now they have found out even alpha 3, alpha 4, alpha 5 chain of collagen 4. So, clinical features include usually affecting 5 to 20 years. Commonest presentation is either gross or microscopic hematuria, nerve deafness, posterior cataract, lens dislocation, corneal dystrophy will be the features of Alport syndrome. So, light microscopy will show the presence of foam cells in the interstitium. This is one of the very few conditions in kidney where you will have foam cells in the interstitium. An electron microscopy, the classical picture would be thinning and splitting up, giving the what appearance? Basket weave appearance under the electron microscopy. This feature is classical of Alport syndrome. To start with, the child would have had thin basement membrane, but as it grows, the rest of the basement will react and will form laminations. That will cause that basket weave like appearance. So this is a normal GBM where thickness will be 300 to 400 nanometers. This is abnormally thin GBM. Here in Alport syndrome, we have thinning, alternate thickening, and this on an electron microscope will show basket weave appearance. So normal GBM thickness is 300 to 400 nanometer, and the commonest thin membrane disease, the commonest cause of benign familial hematuria. So not a feature of Alport syndrome. Glomerular nephritis, is it a feature? Glomerular nephritis, yes, that is why it results in hematuria. Deafness, yes. Autoantibodies against alpha 5 chain of collagen 4, you have to read the options very clearly. Is it due to autoantibodies? When it is due to autoantibodies, then this is going to be called as Goodpasture's. It is actually defect in alpha 5 chain of collagen type 4 and not autoantibodies. Skin biopsy diagnostic, yes. To confirm the diagnosis, you just need to do skin biopsy with a good positive control, because skin will show absence of staining for alpha 5 chain. Corneal dystrophy. So it is not associated with autoantibodies, not a feature of Goodpasture's. Goodpasture is basically an autoimmune disorder where the autoantibodies are directed against alpha 3 chain of collagen type 4, and it is damage to both base membrane of the renal glomeruli and the pulmonary alveolar capillary walls. So, and the patient will be having antibodies from the beginning, but when will they precipitate with the symptoms? When the patient gets exposed to hydrocarbon solvents, or when they get viral infections, or when they are exposed to tobacco smoke. That is when the patient precipitate with the symptoms. So, kidneys will show focal proliferative glomerular nephritis. Will the patient go in for RPGN? RPGN type 1 is due to, type 1 RPGN is due to Goodpasture's syndrome. Type 2 immune complex. Type 3 vasculitis. ANCA positive vasculitis. See, remember all these three are vasculitis. So, ANCA positive or quasi-immune vasculitis for type 3. So Goodpasture will go in for RPGN development. Which is the hallmark feature of RPGN? Crescents. Initially, even for RPGN, so basement membrane rupture. Good. So hemoptysis will be the symptom that brings a patient to the doctor, and the patient will usually die because of renal failure. So not a feature of Goodpasture's. Is it an autoimmune disease? Yes. Runs a benign clinical course? No. When it can go in for RPGN, it cannot have a benign clinical course. Are antibodies against alpha 3 chain of collagen 4? Yes. Pulmonary hemosiderosis? Yes. Subendothelial deposits? Goodpasture's, you have nice linear deposits along the membrane. It is an example for membranous deposits. Which else will have membranous deposits? Dense deposit disease. Which is called as dense deposit disease? MPGN type 2. Where will you have tram track appearance? MPGN type 1 and type 2. That is the common feature for both MPGN types, right. But dense deposit is a feature of MPGN type 2. Where will you have mesangial deposits? IgA and HSP. Good. Electron microscopy is diagnostic in the following. This you can say without explanation. Is it diagnostic in Langerhans histiocytosis? Yes. You will see Birbeck granules. Mesothelioma? Yes. It's one of the few conditions, few tumors where we have to resort to electron microscopy to differentiate this from adenocarcinoma. And Alport syndrome? Basket weave appearance you will see in immunofluorescence, not in electron microscopy. Goodpasture's? Good pastures? No. Yes, good pastures, what will you see? The presence of antibodies, deposition of antibodies along the membrane. Yeah. So, Langhans cell histiocytosis, Birbeck granules, mesothelioma, presence of microvilli, and Alport syndrome, alternate thickening and thinning, resulting in basket weave appearance. So, it is diagnostic. Yeah, actually, electron microscopy will be diagnosed by Alport syndrome. Yes, good. Papillary necrosis. So, papillary necrosis is a complication of, so it is actually due to necrosis of the renal papillae. What causes the renal papillary necrosis would be importantly these 5 causes. One is diabetes, next analgesics, anything that is causing vascular obstruction, malignant hypertension, sickle cell anemia. Among the hemoglobinopathies, sickle cell anemia is associated with papillary necrosis, and even chronic alcoholism may result in papillary necrosis. So, this is a renal, what is this part? Renal pyramid. The tip of the renal pyramid is actually the renal papilla. Right. So, you can see it is supplied by very tiny vessels. When such vessels get obstructed, the papillae has to undergo necrosis. So, it will look grossly like this. Only the papillary areas will show necrosis. All the other areas will be fine. So, the common causes include sickle cell anemia, obstructive pyelonephritis, diabetes, analgesics, even chronic alcoholism. So, this papillary necrosis in the radiological imaging will give such a picture. This golf ball on T, radiological finding, not a histopathological finding. So, this golf ball on a T is appearance specific for papillary necrosis. It just says the absence of this particular tissue. Why it is absent? Because it has undergone necrosis. So, it is a complication of diabetes? Yes. Thalassemia? No. Malignant hypertension? Yes. Malignant hypertension compromises that supply, especially through those tiny vessels. Analgesic abuse? Yes. Renal tuberculosis? No. Enlarged kidneys are seen in. So, we have conditions where the kidneys will be enlarged. So, but I would suggest you to remember conditions where you have shrunken kidneys. It is easy to remember. So, in chronic glomerulonephritis, chronic pyelonephritis, and benign nephrosclerosis are the conditions associated with shrunken kidney. So, how will you differentiate between chronic glomerulonephritis and chronic pyelonephritis kidney? I mean gross. Symmetrically contracted in chronic glomerulonephritis, asymmetrical contraction in chronic pyelonephritis. What causes this asymmetrical contraction? It's basically chronic pyelonephritis due to infection, inflammation that may result in fibrosis, scarring. So, because of the presence of scar, the kidneys will go in for asymmetrical contraction. Just remember these 3 conditions are associated with shrunken kidneys. So, enlarged kidneys are seen in diabetes mellitus? Yes. Chronic glomerulonephritis? No. RPGN? Yes. Hydronephrosis? Yes. RCC? Yes. Polycystic kidney disease? Yes. Armani-Epstein cells are seen in which pathology you will see this? Armani-Epstein cells? Forget about the location. Which pathology you will get to see this Armani-Epstein cells? They are due to accumulation of glycogen. Now, in which condition you will have deposition of glycogen in the renal tubular epithelial cells? When the glycogen level, sugar level in the blood is high, diabetes. So, diabetic kidney hyperglycemia will result in the formation of advanced glycation end products. That is the cause for most of its complications. So, the features specific to diabetic kidney include the the first change to happen and the most uniform change to happen will be the diffuse thickening of capillary basement membrane of the glomeruli. That will be the first event to happen with elevated sugar levels, and then there will be diffuse increase in mesangial matrix and Kimmel-Steele Wilson nodules. the most specific lesion for diabetic kidney. So, this is actually called as intercapillary nodular glomerulosclerosis, you can see. So, this is what, so intercapillary, you can see the nodular thickening. So, remember in diabetes you can have nodular sclerosis, but never focal sclerosis. And apart from this, you have fibrin caps, capsular drops, and you can also see changes in the vessels in the form of hyaline arteriolosclerosis. So, this is a normal kidney. You can see over here thickening of the glomerular basement membrane. This first event to happen with chronically elevated sugar levels. So, the Armani-Epstein cells are due to reabsorption of glycogen by the proximal tubular epithelial cells. So, that is how they look like. As they absorb glycogen, the cells will have such clear appearance. So, Armani-Epstein cells are seen in which part of tubules are exposed to maximum sugar exposure? Proximal convoluted tubule. All are causes of FSGS except, we'll go. So, focal segmental glomerular sclerosis. See, this is when a pathology involves all the glomeruli, or at least more than 50% of the glomeruli, are going to call it as diffuse glomerulopathy. When it is going to affect only proportion of the glomeruli, less than 50% glomeruli involved, it is focal. Segmental, you mean even in the affected glomeruli, only part of the duct is affected, then it is segmental. In the entire part of the entire tuft of the glomerulus is affected, it is global. So, the causes include IgA nephropathy, massive obesity, heroin addiction, sickle cell anemia, HIV, reflex nephropathy. All these are causes of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So, what happens is, because of sclerosis there is scarring, this will impair renal function. So, the pathogenesis is, here you can see changes at the level of visceral epithelial cells, right. For RPGN you will get to see the changes in GBM and the parietal epithelial cells. Here you will get to see the changes mainly centered on visceral epithelial cells. Changes include effacement of the architecture. Where else will you see effacement of visceral epithelial cells? Minimal change disease. So, apart from this effacement, it will have other changes also. Retraction of the epithelial cells, apoptosis of the epithelial cells, necrosis of the epithelial cells, hypertrophy of the epithelial cells. So, effacement, hypertrophy, detachment, necrosis, all such changes you get to see in visceral epithelial cells. So, any pathology that affects the visceral epithelial cells, which picture they are going to present with? Nephrotic or nephritic? So, when anything affects the visceral epithelial cells, the result is going to be nephrotic. Any pathology that is going to affect the glomerular capillary wall or endothelial is going to result in nephritic syndrome. So, when capillary wall, endothelial cells or GBM is ruptured, that will result in leakage of blood and urine, the nephritic syndrome. When visceral epithelial cells are damaged, protein reabsorption is affected. So, that will result in proteinuria, nephrotic syndrome. So, this FSGS patients will present with nephrotic syndrome. Is it a proliferative nephropathy or non-proliferative nephropathy? So, give me the examples of non-proliferative glomerulopathy. Minimal change, membranous, FSGS. Apart from this, which secondary pathologies will cause? Diabetes, amyloidosis, myeloma and fibronectin. All these will result in non-proliferative glomerulopathy. Which deposits you get to see in FSGS? Immunoglobulin. We went through the exception. Which deposits? Which immunoglobulin rather? IgM. Okay, in all the other conditions it will be IgG with or without IgM. But this is only condition where you will have either none or IgM deposits. Intracapillary or extracapillary proliferation FSGS? Non-proliferative. So, nothing to do about proliferation. So, 5 mutually exclusive types do exist. One is the collapsing, then cellular, tip, perihilar and NOS. The most common subtype is NOS. The one with worst outcome will be collapsing. In HIV patients, which subtype exists? Collapsing type of FSGS. This is what. So, when the sclerosis, when the collapse, the sclerosis affects the perihilar region, it is perihilar type of FSGS. When it affects the tip, it is tip lesion, or when it collapse, the sclerosis causes collapse of the capillary walls, it is called as, you can make out over here. In all the rest, the capillary walls are preserved. Though they undergo sclerosis, the wall structure is preserved, vessel structure is preserved. But here you can make out, it is just collapsing, and here it has become cellular. So, these are the 5 mutually exclusive variants of FSGS. So, HIV associated nephropathy, it is a variant of FSGS. The type is collapsing glomerulopathy. Apart from this, you have tubular reticular inclusions and microcyst formation in collapsing glomerulopathy. This is what you can make out, this entire tuft as collapsed. So, all are causes of FSGS except, is heroin a cause of FSGS? Yes. Posterior urethral valve causing reflux. Is reflux a cause of FSGS? Of course, yes. Sickle cell anemia? A mass hero fell sick due to HIV, retired. Sick, that sick stands for sickle cell anemia. Morbid obesity, yes, a mass hero, massive obesity, right. Diabetes mellitus, no. Diabetes never focal. So, this is all about focal segmental, that is diffuse sclerosis in diabetes. Violent lesions are seen in which class of lupus nephritis? Actually, the question is wrong. Violent lesions are seen most often in which class of lupus nephritis? What do they indicate actually? So, SLE, lupus nephritis, we have how many classes? 6 actually. So, for class 1 is minimal, class 2 mesangial, class 3 focal proliferative, class 4 diffuse proliferative, class 5 diffuse membranous, class 6 sclerotic. We have totally 6 classes of lupus nephritis. Where do you have deposition in SLE? Preferred location for SLE? Subendothelial. Okay. Of course, it can have deposits anywhere, but the preferred location, or at least the complex will start getting deposited, starting site will be subendothelial zone. So, this is how a wire loop will look like. Because of the extensive subendothelial deposits, the glomerulus will have such wire loop like appearance. Full house effect of immunofluorescence we will get to see in full house effect, lupus nephritis. So, this wire loop lesions you can get even in class 3, more often you get to see them in, as the name says, it is diffuse proliferative glomerulonephritis, class 4 is. So, wire loop lesions are most often seen in class 4 lupus nephritis. Causes of patchy tubular necrosis, we will see. So, tubular necrosis, it is also called as acute tubular injury. It is due to, tubules getting damaged with the resultant loss of tubular function. What is the most important function tubules do normally? Reabsorption, concentration. So, when tubules lose a function, what will be the result? Protein, no, there will be loss of concentration of urine. The patient will be having polyuria, right. So, the most common cause of acute renal failure is acute kidney injury or acute tubular necrosis. Two types are there, ischemic and toxic. Ischemic type will result when the vascularity to the organ is compromised. When the vascular supply to the organ is cut off, either due to global hypotension or global hypovolemia, or when some pathology affect the vessels that supply the tubules. So, whatever it is, when the vascularity is cut off, the tubules will go in for necrosis, the resultant ischemic type. Yeah, break you mean. Yeah. So, toxic type is due to heavy metals, poisons, or even due to presence of free hemoglobin, myoglobin. This hemoglobin and myoglobin are not meant to be free in the blood. So, when they start appearing free in the blood, they will become toxic to the renal tubular epithelial cells. So, that will result in toxic type of tubular damage. Here you can see continuous damage, whereas ischemic type will have patchy affection. So, this is how we can make out the skip lesions in ischemic type. You will have continuous damage in toxic type. So, apart from this, certain toxins will have special features like mercury chloride having acidophilic inclusions, carbon tetrachloride presenting with neutral lipids in the tubular epithelial cells, or ethylene glycol having calcium oxalate crystals. Causes of patchy tubular necrosis. Patchy tubular necrosis due to ischemia. So, mercury chloride that will be the cause for toxic tubular damage. Trauma causing hypovolemia resulting in ischemic type. Good. Drugs, toxic. Drugs, poisons, metals, everything toxins. Malignant hypertension because of its thickening, sclerosis, hyperplastic arteriolosclerosis. Arterioles will be affected. So, when vessels become sclerotic, at one point they may get completely sclerosed. So, compromising the vascular supply. So, malignant hypertension can compromise vascular supply to any organ, especially the organs supplied by tiny vessels. So, malignant hypertension is the cause of ischemic damage to the tubules. Hemoglobinuria, toxic. So, hemoglobin, myoglobin are not toxic for the tubular epithelial cells.